Hello everybody, today is the 12th of October 2022 and this is the Flux Dev Meeting. We don't have many agenda items so far, so what I will do is we can crack on the maintainers board and hopefully by then we'll have some agenda items. So let me share my screen. Need to do this really quick, otherwise Zoom crashes. So let's try. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Brilliant. All right. Okay, so we can try to start from the prioritized backlog. All right. We can. I think we talked a bit about the changes of Libgichu. I think this was something that was already done, but was closed recently, yeah, which was pretty much moving on from my personal fork of Libgichu to the Flux CG1. So that was actually done a while ago. There is a data race on the Git implementation, which has been fixed together with the changes that we're doing as part of the refactoring. That is not yet merged on main, but all the code and all that, you know, the changes, they're being tracked on another feature, on another issue. So I closed this item for that. So we might still experience this until we get that merged into main, but yeah, we're tracking that merge somewhere else. The fix in itself is actually done. All right, what else? I will, yeah. So I think we talked about this as well briefly last time. So we started migrating into Libgichu 1.5. The tests on this have been quite positive so far. We've done that on the running versions that, you know, Sanskar and I are testing, but this is not yet on the Git refactoring branch. There are 2 PRs for that, and we plan to merge them at some point this week. But the changes on package are already done, which is probably the most important part. Yeah, so recently Sunny created a few changes on package to improve the way we're managing the finalizer. Though that there's quite a really good description of what it does and why that's the case. But pretty much this will help us absorbing all the code rewrites, even on simpler controllers. Basically, the pattern that we had before worked really well with source controller, but controllers are a bit more simple in terms of conditions and all. It didn't work as much, you know, it didn't work as well. So with these changes from Sunny, now it should be, you know, a lot more straightforward for us to adopt the new patterns in you know, the controllers. So really good job there, Sunny. Oh yes, so that is another one within Git, which again is merged into package, is not into the Git refactoring as of yet. The main change here is that part of the refactoring, some of the errors we marked as, you know, trace level, but errors. So even if you're not on trace mode, you're still coming out as errors, which is not great. So this kind of reverts that change, and that should be merged into the Git refactoring branch this week as well. Because after all, like we're gonna get a version of all the changes from package and then merge that at once. That would be quite useful. Cool. And then these are part of the refactoring of Customize. So this was part of a discussion, I believe, on the last dev meeting. And the key point on that was that there were quite a few things around the controller's part, the controller's code here, which were public functionality, which we don't want to make a GA. It shouldn't be part of that public API. So Stefan is pretty much kind of, making sure that that is not the case on the roadmap of GA. So that's, again, really, really good stuff. On the overall backlog, there is another 2 points here. Let's just quickly check them. Oh, yes. So there was an issue with Azure Blob Storage. So if you had a SAS key, which was at container level, it wasn't working as it should. So basically, some touchy fixed that issue, and we issued a patch release for source controller. So that as well was done last week. Let me just move that across. Yes, so these are, let me just mark this as well as part of GA. And we can put that as done. So these changes here from Sunny pretty much change the way we present the status of objects on source controller, and now they are more explicit that you can actually see the item, the fields on the status. Before, I believe we only had the checksum, so it was harder for you to kind of compare and so on. So yeah, that's pretty good. Cool. I think that is pretty much what happened since the last session. I added into PRs requiring reviews these blocking secure HTTP connections across Flux. So these are RFC that we discussed a while ago, and the idea is pretty much to kind of document and agree how we're dealing with all things related to HTTP connections, being able to block them and so on. So if anyone has any views on it, please review that as soon as possible, really. Cool. Now let's go back to our agenda. We have one item there, which is around image reflector. Let's see who is covering that agenda item.
I just added it just to let people know. So image reflector controller refactor is ready. It's more focused on adding case status compatibility in the API, and also does some general improvements. The implementation had some bugs that fixed those things, so it must be more stable now. So I need some help in just testing it, seeing if there is any issue, any change in behavior compared to what we have today.
Brilliant. That is.
And this has, because of the new API, people, when trying this, you have to install the new API. If you just install the container, it will not work.
Sorry, I didn't catch the last bit. Do you mind repeating?
It has, because of the new API, you have to install the new CRDs. Just trying the new container will not work.
Oh yes, that's a good point. On that point, do you mind maybe just after or as a comment, either on the description or later, just like some lines around how people could test this, like where they would source the CRD from and so on, because especially if they're not really used to developing Flux, that would be quite helpful. But yeah, brilliant, really, really good stuff. I will actually add this as well to the list of things to be reviewed. Yeah, so we have that on that list as well, in case folks have some capacity for reviews. So I'm adding that now. Anything else around this agenda item?
I have a general question, but not related to the agenda item.
Yeah, sure, go for it.
So like as a organization kind of adopts Flux and you know, you have your image automation controller and it's making, you know, maybe like hundreds of thousands of commits to your repository because you're just constantly deploying new things. The size of this can get quite big. And like maybe like your clone time is impacted. And correct me if I'm wrong, please, but I believe that with libgit2, it does not do a shallow clone versus git2go where it does a shallow clone. So if you're using like libgit2 in the image automation controller, you know, if you set a timeout very low, you might time out, you know, when trying to clone the repository and push your updated images. Is there any kind of, you know, is there something that a user may be doing wrong here? Or is there any kind of like recommended path forward by the Flux community to kind of clean out your, like your repository that you're using to do your Git ops with?
That is a really good question. So I think these kind of touches a few topics, right? So the first one I would like to bring up is something that Sanskar raised recently, actually on the last dev meeting, which is about allowing users to use good GoGit for image automation controller. With that, the shallow cloning would be available, and then, you know, for users that can use GoGit, that would be an initial benefit right away.
Correct me if I'm sorry to interrupt. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think you can push back to a clone repo. So like if to a shallow clone repo. So if you shallow clone a repository and you make some changes and you do commit, I don't think you can push it back. I'm not 100% sure about that, but that's my understanding.
I'm not 100% sure on that, especially on the V2 protocol. I would assume you could do that.
Let me try that out.
Yeah, I don't know for sure, but I feel like it does, right? Because before libgit2 is introduced with like the, I think, experimental managed transport, it was using git2go, which uses the shallow clone. And one thing that we saw is like, you know, if we disable the managed transport on the, I think, image automation controller, it I think reduces the clone time. Whether that does a shallow clone or not, I'm not too sure. But there's definitely some performance issues with using like large repositories and libgit2.
Yeah, so there's definitely a few things on there as well. So there is one thing that we started looking into, but it's not the highest priority right now because we're working towards GA, which is around caching. So for example, when you're on source controller, if we identify that the source hasn't changed, so it's the same commit as, you know, the last reconciliation, we don't do that clone, which means you don't download everything and so on. So especially if you have concurrency on that controller, that would make an impact on how long it takes for the other reconciliations to take place. There is an issue already on image automation controller repository. I will share that here in a second. So that could help on repositories that are not too large, that doesn't get updated too frequently, because otherwise, like if you have at least one change in between each reconciliation, it would be the same as not having anything from a caching perspective. So that is one thing, especially after the recent changes that we're doing with Git, we should be able to start looking into that. I'm not sure if we will be able to learn that before GA, but it's definitely something quite important for us. Overall, how big is your, you know, the repository that you're having issues with? Do you have an idea of what is the problem? Is it like amount of tags and refs within the repository? Is it that it has like really large files, or is just that overall, you know, history of the repository is quite large?
Excluding the Git folder, the repository itself is really, it's not too big. I think it's at the most under 250 megabytes. But that is a good point that you bring up about like the refs and seeing if there's a lot of refs existing that might be impacting like when it does like a full clone. but we're talking like hundreds of thousands of commits here in a repository that manages multiple environments. To give you context.
Yeah.
How many megabytes did you say? Like 50?
With excluding the Git folder, the last time I calculated the number, it's been a while ago, so I don't know exactly off the top of my head, but it's going to be like 250 megabytes or less.
250 megabytes of YAMLs, or is it just your app? Is the YAMLs a part of the app repo?
I think it's a mono repo, so they have like loads of different things on the same repo. Is that right, Kaden?
I'm actually wrong. So it's 7.4 megabytes without Git folder. I think I was including the Git folder in my previous number. So not like a huge amount of resources or YAML documents. I think it's primarily where most of the bloat is coming from is the Git folder in the space when it downloads all the refs and whatnot.
All right. So Oscar, do you think it would be worth to have a profile of the IEC just to see if there's anything we can investigate?
Yeah, that would be helpful.
Do you mind sharing the link for the profiling? I always
I'll share it on the Zoom chat. Yeah.
Brilliant. Yeah, so basically, Keaton, if you could take a profile of your image automation controller, Sanskar will be sharing the link, just that. And then you can share that through the CNCF Slack, and then we'll have a look and see if there's anything specifically that is impacting on your side. Kingdom just shared here that it is feasible to do, it's possible to do a push from a shallow clone, but we have to remember and check whether that is possible with GoGit. That would be a first thing. And yeah, one thing that he mentioned is that it might be slightly slower, but if we're saving a lot on the cloning, maybe that kind of pays off. Either way, that would need to wait until we allow GoGit support, which is something that should come soon.
Okay. I'm a little bit confused as to what kind of direction the project wants to take in terms of its Git library, because I don't know the full context, but if I understand, like Libgichu and like this kind of like experimental managed transport is kind of new, and from my perspective, it's where I see the project was going and kind of phasing out GoGit. Is that a true statement?
Well, it is a bit more complicated than that. So
it's fine.
First, let's just cover the differences, right? So the Libgichu, the main reason why we use Libgichu is to support the Git protocol v2. So for example, if you have a Azure DevOps repository, they only support the Git protocol v2, which means you cannot use GoGit at all. The Libgichu is slightly more maintained than GoGit. It feels that way anyway. But it doesn't support shallow clones, for example. So, there is all these differences between the two, which is quite hard for us to just do one versus the other.
Yeah.
So for the time being, what we want to do is support both. We discussed about also having a different implementation, which would be an auto implementation. So users don't need to think about this. If they, if they're going for, Azure DevOps, it will automatically migrate into Libgichu. Otherwise, it will be continue on GoGit. He just shared the link that kind of compares the two implementations. It doesn't give much of that kind of context about like how maintained they are and stuff like that. But at least it shows the differences in terms of the impact for Flux users. So that is definitely a really good resource.
Okay, awesome. Well, thanks for the doc link. I should have read the docs first. Yeah, no problem. Thanks for all y'all's help. I'll go ahead and do the profiling and look at some of the like Git references and stuff like that. But thank you again.
No worries. And as soon as I get the caching, well, actually, let me look for the caching issue quickly as well. So I'll share here, and then what you can do is you can just subscribe to it, and as soon as there are any changes, you can just get that.
Before we move on from this, I just wanted to mention that the new OCI repository feature is meant to address this, although it's not immediately obvious from the feature how it addresses this. This is one of the things that it does help with. When you have lots of repositories that are automated, and maybe they don't necessarily all need a commit for each automation, the OCI repository source is more flexible because of the way that you can use tags. So you can label for an environment while you label version of an image, an OCI image. And that will push the change to the environment if you have an OCI repository source that's pointed at that as a label. This sounds a lot like a latest tag, I know, but it saves you from having a Git commit, and it doesn't really have any audit drawbacks from a perspective of events that can be logged. So this may not be exactly what you're looking for because it's a change of direction. You wouldn't be using image automation controller everywhere necessarily anymore, although you can still use it together with OCI repository. You would have that option of doing automation a different way.
Okay. I'm uneducated in this aspect. Do you have like a link or something to kind of like this Flux OCI?
Yeah, absolutely. There's an OCI cheat sheet link that I'll provide. That's probably the quickest way in. And there's a video presentation we gave for the CNCF that shows maybe in a little bit more depth how it can be used. So I'll put both links up on the notes.
Thank you.
Nice. I always get too excited when we talk about Git. Cool. So let's go for the next topic then. We have Flux V1, Repositor Archival. Yes, I think this was Kingdom's item. Maybe not. So
Yes, I'm muting myself again, so sorry. Yes, it's my item. And I just wanted to make sure it was in the notes. There's no fanfare to go with this. It's just an announcement. We do plan to archive Flux V1 after KubeCon.
Yes. So just to kind of cover on that point, that is planned to happen on the 1st of November. So yeah, any doubts, questions, yeah, just let us know. There is an issue that Kingdom put on the doc notes. So yeah, again, if anyone has any questions, please just mention that. Cool. And then Daniel. Hello, Daniel. Do you want to cover the KubeConf? Yeah.
Yes. So Friday, if we want to do a press release for Flux, I think we should. We need to hand that in on Friday. So I added the link to the document to the draft in the agenda. So if you have any bullet points, anything that should be noted, or is it like a big deal to you and should be in the press release, please make sure you at least add a bullet point, maybe with a link in there, and then I can expand on that. The CNCF let us know again and again that analysts, the press, everyone is like really crazy for these press release kind of information beforehand. So it would be good to get it on Friday.
Nice. Yeah, I'll make sure I'll have a look on that as well. So yes, nice one, Daniel. A quick point, well, I didn't put on the agenda, but I'll add that in a second. But basically, I heard back from tax security on our security kind of work with them. So they're kind of due to review quite a few things from the Flux project perspective. Apparently they reviewed our thread modeling and they added some comments. So the idea is to review that, come back to them. They also suggested, well, to kind of meet up with them today, but it was conflicting with this meeting, so I couldn't do that. But what I would do is book for the next session that they have available, and then keep you guys all up to date with it. Cool. Anything else? Any other topics? Anything interesting folks want to talk about?
I had one question. The insecure HTTP thing, will that be implemented soon?
Yes. So, well, the idea is to do that before GA, because that will, you know, impact pretty much our APIs, right? And one of the reasons behind that was as well to make sure that, you know, are the flags named as we want them to be named across the controllers and so on. So, for example, for TLS verification, we have a specific name for the kubeconfig. When we're talking about Helm controller and customized controller, is that what we want to do? Or do we want to do something more generic that kind of does that across any places that, you know, we allow that kind of thing? But again, that is to discuss that on that PR and define the next steps and make sure that we do that across the board. Cool. Yeah, I think that is it from my side. Anything else?
Yeah, a small bit. I'm not sure if I mentioned it here, but regarding graduation, so you might have seen that the TOC sort of took a bit of a vacation from graduating and incubating projects before KubeCon. So we're in this break period now, but Matt Farina told us that as soon as KubeCon is over, everyone is back home. He's going to start the public comment period for Flux, which is great. So from there on, it's going to be, I think, 1 or 2 weeks of public comment, and then afterwards, it's going to be the vote of the TOC.
Amazing. That's really good. Thank you for updating us on that, Daniel. Hopefully soon that is done. So fingers crossed. Cool. Any more items? Anything ad hoc you guys want to mention, talk about?
I found one more thing. The source controller has a PR about maximum limit of the artifact, right? Do you want to discuss about that?
All right, let me see. That's on package,
929.
right?
No, it's in source controller.
Source controller.
Yeah, but I think Stefan is the author and is not here in this meeting. So.
Sorry, what was the last comment? I was looking for it. I didn't pay attention. Sorry.
Stefan is the author, and he's not present in this meeting, so it might be a better idea to have this discussion when he's in the meeting. Like it was, he only proposed it originally as well. So
I think we are about to release this in the next release.
Yeah, I think that's what we talked on next on the last dev meeting, that this would be, well, Stefan was pushing for this to be released on the next minor. Right, well, let me add this into the list of things to be reviewed with priority. Well, my main concerns there were around, ideally we would short circuit whatever operation we're trying to do. So for example, if we have that flag that limits the amount, well, the size of the artifact, as soon as we know we pass the limit, we stop processing anything, because then you pretty much save, CPU and memory accordingly. But later, Stefan came back on my comments there and said that that information doesn't get updated mid-flight, which means you need to finish the entire tower operation to then know how big the file is, or how big the file is going to be, which then it kind of, I still have to think whether I think there is any benefit having that. Otherwise, I'm still thinking about it. I'll get back to that PR this week. But is there any other comments? Anyone else have a specific feeling or thought about that PR?
Other than that, it looks good to me. I think the goal was to save the Customize controller, its memory usage, and this will help with that.
Well, in theory, right? So one of my comments on that, well, I actually didn't put on the PR, so actually I just on the PR. Ideally, we would do that from a consumption perspective. So for example, if I'm downloading something from a server, I can just cut it after a given, size. If we did that consistently on all the consumers, we wouldn't need this at all here, right? So what you could do is make sure that when we're contacting, in this case, source controller, we pretty much cut, any downloads after a given limit is reached. The benefit with that is that first, you don't have impact on the network, because between those pods, you're not consuming more than you should. You would even not start trying to untar this file, because again, like, you didn't finish downloading it. So you kind of short circuit the process way earlier from a consumer perspective. I'm still not sure whether introducing an artifact max limit kind of helps that much on the consumer front, because after all, there's so many other things that could happen in between, and that would, that could still impact the consumers. But I'll think a bit more about that and comment on the PR. Any other points? Anything that anyone wants to bring up or ask about or comment on or ask for help? All right. Okay, so that's it then. So thank you very much, everybody. You guys have a nice week, and see you guys next week. Cheers.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.